Hi, everybody. I'm Danny Marcus, CMA's curator of collections and exhibitions. I'm pretty happy to be welcoming you all to this talk, which is special on a number of levels. I think the secret is sort of out. We are launching tonight an artwork by Tavares Strachan, who sits to my left and at the center of the stage for you all, called Barroom. And Barroom is a bar and a cafe and an artwork and a lot of other things too. And so at the end of the talk, we're going to invite you all to experience Barroom in person, although I'm imagining that all of you are not going to fit in it at one time, so be mindful of that. But it's sort of the animating cause for us to gather together here tonight. I'm going to make a couple quick thanks because Barroom, as you can imagine, doesn't just happen. There is a universe of people behind this project. The museum does not really open bars and cafes every day. We especially don't open bars and cafes that are also artworks every day. So I want to first just thank every one of my CMA colleagues. You guys knocked this out of the park. This was big. This was very, very big. Everyone who touched this project brought everything that they had, and you all did extraordinary work, so thank you. I want to thank Tavares' studio. You were sort of the other half of this enterprise, and you guided us, but you also have just been extraordinary partners as well. I want to thank Pete and Michelle Scantland and the Franklin County Board of Commissioners for supporting this project very generously. I want to thank the museum's executive director, Brooke Minto. Brooke's vision made this happen. And I want to thank Tavares himself, who has just been the most generous person with us, and it's been a pleasure and an honor to go on this journey together. Let me flip over from the thanking into the introducing, and then we'll get into the conversing. So, and I'm just going to do this as quickly as I can because the main event is not me talking to you. Tavares Strachan is a Bahamian-born conceptual artist who lives and works between New York, Nassau, and a little bit of London, too. His work has been featured in numerous solo exhibitions in the US and abroad, including most recently, as of last week or a matter of days ago, The Day Tomorrow Began, his first US museum survey, which I'm very proud to say that the Columbus Museum of Art is co-organizing with the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. LACMA just opened their presentation, again, days ago, and it's an extraordinary show. It's coming here in May of next year. Tavares' artistic practice moves between storytelling and world-making, between art and science, and between exploration and introspection. He's easily one of the most ambitious, and maybe I should use a different word, courageous, artists working today. His work opens a portal to places, ideas, and histories far outside the museum's walls, challenging how we think about what art can and can't do. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, essayist, and cultural critic from Columbus, Ohio. He's written... That was good, thank you. He's written on life and music and much more in many publications, The Fader, Pitchfork, The New Yorker, and The New York Times, and then some, and has published the numerous award-winning and deserving books, including The Crown Ain't Worth Much, a collection of poems, They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us, a collection of essays. Go Ahead in the Rain, Notes to a Tribe Called Quest. A Fortune for Your Disaster, another collection of poems. A Little Devil in America, Notes in Praise of Black Performance. And There's Always This Year, on basketball and ascension, with another book, I'm Always Looking Up and You're Jumping, on its way next year. For so many of us in Columbus, he is simply our lodestar. The value of his love of this place and his support for the communities that lifted him up and carried him cannot be quantified. Both Hanif and Tavares are MacArthur Genius Grant awardees, an honor they share with fellow Columbus-based artists Amina Robinson and Ann Hamilton. That is kind of like the pretense for our getting them together, but we would have done it anyway. So I just want to extend an extra shout out to the MacArthur Foundation for supporting tonight's conversation. Thanks, MacArthur.
We gotta do the secret MacArthur handshake.
Oh no. Don't do it in front of this crowd though. So, I mean, I think we want to talk toward, into, and around, and through Barroom, but maybe we can start by talking a little bit about place and places that we come from and the ways that we carry those places with us. I know, Hanif, like, you're incredibly well known in this room already, based at least solely on the outpouring of enthusiasm that we just saw. So, but I think many people know some aspects of your story of place. I just wonder if you guys could each kind of bring us into how you approach place and the places that you're from, but also places that you've chosen to continue to be rooted in. Because I think that's like a really key, key to understanding everything you do. And either of you can take that. But.
Well, thank both of you for graciously welcoming me to your home. It's a privilege to be here. But maybe I can tell a little story about Columbus.
That would be great.
Yeah. About 20 plus years ago, I had learned of the story of a famous, who wasn't so famous, explorer named Matthew Henson. And he had discovered the North Pole in 1909 with a guy named Robert Peary. Now, if you know the story, Matthew Henson looks almost exactly like me. So imagine someone who looks like me getting to the North Pole in 1909. For context, this is like going into space in 1909. This is a big deal. Henson's story was, for the most part, eradicated from the narrative of the discovery of the pole. At the same time, I was a young graduate student at Yale, and I had this fantasy of moving 4 tons of ice from the Arctic to my elementary school. And so I worked with a few of my friends, and the process began. I visited the Arctic in 2005, and I discovered the most perfect river and extracted the most perfect piece of ice I could find. It was this beautiful piece of nature. And the dream was to take it to my elementary school in the Bahamas and essentially use the sun's power to keep it alive. The biggest challenge was moving so much ice. Do you know what I mean? A few years before that, I had a friend named Jordan Rayner, and we were going to the Met for the first time as an undergrad, and this Marvin Gaye got to speak too.
Always. Always.
Yeah, there's room for everyone, so it's all good. So Jordan and I on this journey to the Met in a school bus, and we're talking about what each other's family does or did, and telling her about my mom who's a seamstress, and she's like, oh well, my dad works for FedEx. Okay, so put that in your pocket for a little while. Go back to 2005. We're trying to move this piece of ice, and my project manager, who's a guy named Christopher Hoover, says, well, why don't we just FedEx it? I said, okay. Didn't really think of that. And so I immediately remember this story with Jordan and I on this bus to the Met. So I, out of the blue, 2, 3, 4 years after graduation, hadn't spoken to Jordan at all. So I apologetically called Jordan. And I said, hey, Jordan, does your dad still work at FedEx? And she says, yeah, he still does. And she says, why? And I said, well, I'd like to move 4.5 tons of ice from the Arctic to my elementary school. There's something about this story that makes me very emotional, because so much of art making is about being seen and having people see you. And before prestigious institutions like the one that we're occupying now at Lackmore and these other institutions saw me, there's tons of people that try to see you. David Renner, we had no money, by the way, during the time of this project. So David Renner, who's actually here tonight and is from this town, graciously made the shipping of this piece of ice from the Arctic to the Bahamas happen. It was shipped, and in 2 days it showed up in perfect condition. And the students of this elementary school, which I went to, were able to enjoy this Arctic remnant. And Jordan reached out to me yesterday and graciously asked if David can join us tonight. Is David here? He left for a concert. Okay. That makes sense.
Guys got a life.
Still, that was crazy.
In any case,
did he know you were going to tell the story?
yeah, no, he didn't know. Say it again? Yeah. Well, it is made up in a way, right? Anyway, so it brings us back to this place. It brings me back to this place in a crazy way, that we'd all be here and David would be here, and he's the guy that, like, in a way, helped to facilitate this work that launched a lot of what I think about now and a lot of what I make. And I realize how grateful I am to this town in ways in which I didn't even know I was. So thank you both for having me here, and that's the story about place.
My artist bio normally just reads Hanif Abdurraqib is a writer from the east side of Columbus, Ohio. Mostly because I don't think the accolades really matter that much. But additionally, I don't have, I didn't graduate from anywhere. I, finished high school, dropped out of college. Like, I don't have, but I did grow up close enough to Amina Robinson to where I could go to her house. I don't know if anyone is of my age and grew up on the east side, but you used to be able to go to just like watch Amina work, and when I was a kid, I lived in around the Greenbrier housing projects, which got the nickname Uzi Alley, because it was deemed that it was too dangerous of a place for even the police to come. Now, it's important to note that the residents of this place did not give it that name. It's important to note that no one who loved this place gave it that name, which is say because if you allow other people to call the place you live in Love a war zone, then that makes you afraid. The intent is to make you afraid of the people who you live and love alongside. So that was a concern to me as a kid. But Amina Robinson, you go to her house, and she would be working on these large collage things or these large items, and she would tell you, well, go back to your house and, go in your trash or whatever and bring me an egg carton or bring me like a gallon of milk or bring me like some plastic. And you would do, for me, I was so excited. I wasn't a visual artist, so I just loved Amina, and so I would do it. And you would watch her after a week or so create these landscapes out of these objects that looked like your neighborhood or looked like the neighborhood you knew. She would create Mount Vernon out of like cut up egg cartons and shit like that. You know what I mean? And it was such a beautiful thread for me to say this person is taking items, found objects that people deem to be disposable, and creating neighborhoods that the city deems to be disposable, or the city deems to be pathways to creating something quote unquote greater, right? And it resonated with me in such this big way because Amina did not make anything small. And so these were gigantic kind of godlike entities. And I remember feeling like, I guess to shorten this and cut to it, it's important for me to say I'm not only from Columbus, Ohio, but I'm from the east side of Columbus, Ohio, because there's a lineage of black artists that come out of the east side of Columbus that I feel beholden to. Like Walt Neal, Scott Woods, Amita Robinson, Duarte, who we all love. And these are people who are important. I mean, like the list is very long, right? And more than anywhere else, I'm from the places that those people create from and deem to be beautiful, you know? And so I think the question of place is, whenever I workshop stuff with young writers, specifically teenagers, I always say, okay, tell me where you're from, but tell me where you're from in the idea of the place where you feel most at home. Because that generates a different answer than being like, well, I'm from Columbus, I'm from Bexley, if someone says, I am from the sound of my mother's laugh, that means something different, and we can say, okay, well, we can have a conversation now, right? A more interesting conversation we can have than one that's rooted in geography, which is faulty and flawed and is not real. Any building you love will be something else. And so memory is perhaps the place. East Columbus, when I say I'm from East Columbus, I'm from an East Columbus that is rooted in the home of Amina Robinson. And I'm from East Columbus that is sitting at the feet of Scott Woods and Writer's Block. And I'm from all these places that cannot be taken from me. And I think that is more powerful than to say, I am from this neighborhood that no longer exists. I'm from this basketball court that is now a parking lot. You know, so from this, I think, is more about memory than anything else.
Yeah, and place too. That's place too. I mean, like place, the place you're from, like it's not geographic coordinates on a map, right? I mean, it's something also that no one else can be from in the way that you're from that place. It's totally you. Tavares, when you were thinking about, you know, like you're a very young artist when you're hauling the ice via FedEx Custom Critical, like, you know, there are a lot of routes that FedEx services and a lot of places that you could have brought that ice. So, I'm curious, like, how, I mean, was it immediately obvious as you began working on that project that it's not just like the ice would be bound for the Bahamas or it would be bound for Nassau, but it would be bound for your own elementary school? Like, was that always part of the Can you talk a little bit about that decision and then, like, you know, what the meaning of bringing that piece of ice to that place for you was in that moment?
Yeah, I think, you know, Hanif, listening to you talk about place makes you want to think about scale, a lot about scale, and how those of us who are from small towns, we talked about this earlier, how we love to self-deprecate to the point where we trash our own towns. You know what I mean? Right? And I feel like I love where I'm from so much, right? And I'm definitely not going to trash it, right? And the ice work was a celebration of bringing something almost like a happy dog that's just like, I found this in the bush. Come look at this. Because I just get excited, and that level of excitement and joy is, I think, hopefully it translates in the work. But for me, it really was about prioritizing in the way that you're talking about yourself as a child, making those kinds of spaces for you and for me, and prioritizing our experiences in our communities at a level in which matches the value and contributions of the great legends that produced the communities that we are from in the first place. And so I think this big piece of ice is about this big story. I mean, if it was a small story, maybe it would be a small piece of ice. But this was a gigantic story about someone who was legendary, and I wanted to let all the children in my elementary school know, and even my own self as a child in a way, like I'm like thinking about myself as a child in a way, what this dude did in 1909, and no one was paying attention to it. And I was like, look over here. So I think for me, it's about like encouraging us to stop with the small town, like hanging your head down. And it's like, I said this earlier, like being from a small town like I am. I mean, the country is 350,000 people, and the island is 21/7 I was born on, just to give you some context. But being on a small town and doing the thing, whatever the thing is that one does in a small town, and doing it successfully is sometimes like a kid who is learning to ride a bike for the first time, who's unaware that they're riding, right? It's like the first time your parent lets you go, and you're actually riding, and you're like, they're still holding me, but you're actually doing the thing. And I think about that all the time.
And also, there's a real generosity to what you're doing too, because so much of your work at this scope and scale is also filling in the pockets of memory, and offering that to other people. It was cool when we were in there and you were like, well, this is just where I was as a kid. Like my dad was sitting right there, And there's a real generosity to that kind of offering of a childhood space that can't be functionally taken away,
Yeah, one of my on that topic, one of my good friends is a clinical psychologist, and we talk a lot about this search for the inner child and how it's about our own grappling with this sense of what is true, like what is pure, and it's in that childhood realm, and how I think a lot about that, and for me, when I think about that, it converts me into being very courageous in a way that I'm not usually. But when I think about prioritizing making work for like you or any of you in here as children, I think like, oh, wow, we could do anything, and that sense of vulnerability is connected to feeling courageous, because I don't think you could have one without the other.
There's something about that perspective, which I think is really particular to being a child, where like your sense of the boundaries around what's yours and like what's your family's and what's the people's around you, your friends, is a lot more porous than when you're an adult and you have this kind of, things harden around the self and the who you are and the way that the world interprets you. And that dimension of it's not quite the collective, because that's also a word that adults, I think, come up with to explain what happens when there are multiple people who are in the same place at the same time. But that slippage between what's yours, what's mine, what's ours, I think that's really powerfully a part of your work, Tavares. And I just wanted to mark that I think it's also really a powerful part of your writing, Hanif, where like the I and the we like find all of these ways to be together in your writing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think and I try to maintain this, I was a kid who really enjoyed the feeling of getting away with something. Immensely. I mean, I would sneak into punk shows. I would, when I was like 14 years old, from age 14 to 16, I never paid to get into a Columbus Crew game. I was sneaking out, sorry, coach. I was sneaking into the games, and I wasn't even doing it. Yes, I grew up poor with no money, but I was doing it with the feeling of having gotten away with something.
You could do it.
I could do it. And I think that there's something really that excites me now as an artist about that sense of wonder that asks me what I can get away with, and not even in a nefarious way, not where I'm trying to trick people or fool people, but to say, can I, for example, to look at a book like There's Always This Year, to ask myself, can I make a book that looks like no book I've ever seen before? And when you start out if you start out at a point where there's no baseline for failure, I'm trying to make something that I've never seen exist, so I don't actually know what failure looks like, you know what I mean? And that allows you to really be playful and really be, and it extracts, we were talking about courage backstage, and I think I'm always trying to act in opposition to these immense fears that I carry. The question that I ask myself before writing any new book is, what is the thing that I'm afraid of this time? And I don't think the writing of the book is an attempt to make me less afraid of the thing. It's actually to just sharpen and hone my relationship with it. To ask myself, why am I afraid of becoming my father? If I write 70,000 words towards that, I might be able to love the version of myself that is going to come, that is going to resemble him whether I want to or not, right? And I think that kind of...
Whoa. You have to say that again. Because I feel like you said that very quickly, and I feel like I want us to hear that again.
Does anyone here come up in Poetry Slam? Where they like make you rewind the thing? I feel like
I'm like, whoa, what? Wait.
Is my dad in the room? Probably not. I'm becoming my father, who I love deeply, but have a complicated relationship with. But we also become our parents without even, we can't really control it, just happens. And so I think one thing that I really spent a lot of time contemplating in the making of my last book was, how do I build just a real broad landscape of grace for my father in our relationship, because I'm going to become him, and so I need to build a platform of grace for not only his present self, but my future self, you know? Because if I don't love him in the present, I don't love myself 5 years from now when I look in the mirror and say, I've picked up all these idiosyncrasies, not just physical, I mean like actual built-in idiosyncrasies. And that is a fear that I don't want to get over, I just want to get more comfortable with. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
Tavares, do you feel like there's some hint of that in Barroom too? I mean, we were talking in the bar, literally at the bar, before coming on, and you were saying that, like, Barroom is a familiar space for you, but it's also a familial space in that you can picture your parents there, and you can imagine yourself having been there as a child as well. And I wondered, as you, I mean, it would be great if you could talk a little bit about the genesis of Barroom for those who are coming to it really fresh, but also, like, I'm just so curious, like, in making this project now twice, because it had an earlier life and this is its second iteration, like, is your family kind of in the mix somehow as you're working through what it means to make this space and then to give it away to people?
The piece that both of you are talking about that really resonates with me is the relationship between fear and courage, and how much they rely on each other, because courage doesn't exist without fear, right? You almost need the fear to be courageous. And I think that's an important just thing to push a pin in. And that's so, like, not a lot of art would exist without that dynamic, right? Like, art is the thing that's often always under attack. When everyone starts running out of money, let's just make less art. And you're like, well, right? I think going back to your question, Danny, about the nature or the origin of Barroom, but also the nature of attempting to celebrate the simplicity of the spaces that I was raised in, is about just being able to look at the self and say, I'm okay with it. Like, this is the color on the wall. I'm sure in New York or Tokyo or St. Petersburg, there's a better looking, shinier wall with fancier materials, but this is the wall that I was raised with, and this is dope for its own reasons. And this is like the process of unlearning and the process of self-appreciation and self-upliftment and knowledge of self and all these things that come along with studying one's own environment. Because, fortunately for you, you didn't go to the places I went to for school. Because I spent so much time in my adult life unlearning all the things that I was taught in these places. And maybe people don't really think about that, but so, like, I wouldn't, if the version of me that that was a student here in America stayed the same way, I would not make the work that's here tonight, right? I would be trying to copy some European who made a thing that everyone thought was great. And so I think for me, I think the sharing the kind of the energy and the essence of my upbringing is the feeling that I'm going for with Barroom, right? It's the feeling. It's, you know, the objects are great and the lighting's great and the music and all the things, but what I really want you to walk away with is the feeling of pride in the smallness of the space that I was being raised in, the beauty of it, the wisdom and the intellectual savvy of the people, the tenderness, the feeling of being supported, the idea that you didn't have enough to eat half the time, but you had so much love in the community and people looked out for each other. And all those things that seem so insignificant, when you get older, you're like, holy shit, people don't do that anymore. And so I think for me, like, this whole experience of creating Barroom is about revisiting the things that was so amazing about growing up that I forgot, or that it was like intellectual out of me or something.
Yeah, I mean, the idea for our team that, like, it's, you have to understand, you don't often get the assignment as a curator or as a curatorial department or, you know, as a museum to, like, make a bar. But, like, it is at least something that you can talk about with people and say, we're making a bar, and there's, you know, that conjures a certain process and a set of ideas about what that might look like. But, you know, this is your 4th visit to Columbus, and in every visit and every conversation we've had, and this has been consistent, you know, in every interaction we've had with the studio as well, like, the idea that we're creating a feeling has always been primary. It's never been, I mean, it obviously is about a bar, but it's not, the bar is
The drinks taste
The drinks are pretty damn good. But, you know, but it is, I mean, that's part of the feeling. But we have non-alcoholic drinks as well. Yeah, I mean, that's the much higher challenge, actually, is like, how do you create something that is emotional? Like, it's not tangible or physical.
I don't have expertise on this, as I just write things, but what I love about Barroom and what I love about what like, a physical space is a real opportunity to create a portal. So, like, I don't actually know what the bar is like from your childhood. Even when you told me, like, yes, this is a line in a way where my pops used to sit over there and I used to, but I do know what a bar is. I've been in a bar. I have communed in a bar, and in that bar I've had some sense of, I don't even drink, you know what I mean? But, like, yeah, I've had these senses of enlightenment because those are places, those are community hubs for our folks. I have been in a bar when I am too young to have been in a bar, and I have met people I loved while being too young to be in that bar. And so, like, the barroom construct for me is an opportunity for a portal, not just into your specific world, like your, as Toni Morrison would say, your particularized world, but also the world that connects every memory that I have that might blurrily intersect with your memory. And I think that's the whole thing. It's like sampling in a song, right? Where it's you hear like a faint vocal sample in a song and you're like, oh, I've heard my mother sing that song. And therefore you are resurrecting, you know. The producer, Conductor Williams, talks about how sampling is like a portal of resurrection, where it's like, you know, I can't bring my grandmother back, but I can bring back a song that I heard her sing in the kitchen when I was a kid, and therefore she's alive. I think that's kind of, the physical space provides like multitude of opportunities for that.
I mean, that's so much what, you know, we wanted to do, like, with Barroom. You know, it's not, it is about the drinks, obviously, but it is, but it's really about, like, this is a town that has bars, right? Like, we don't lack for watering holes. But, like, yeah. I don't think there's a bar like this exactly in Columbus. And, you know, I've been trying to think a lot in the last couple of days about why that is. I think some of it is that we've had the freedom in a way to make a very informal kind of space. Like you'll see in a minute, like there are no tables in barroom. Like you certainly don't have to get a reservation to roll up to barroom. It's a place where like bodies are gonna be jumbled together because like that's the kind of room it is, you know. And all of this kind of links to the thought that like we really undervalue like the unprogrammed and the I don't want to say the untidy because we run a really tidy bar. It's clean, and the health inspector was here yesterday and he thought so too. But like at the same time, like the spirit that animates the bar is a little bit unruly, and it's a little bit, you know, again, unconstrained. And I think that as much as anything else, like that's the value that barroom kind of is wagering on.
I really love how folks here are so excited to collaborate with each other. And, you know, when you're measuring strengths and weaknesses of a town, of a city, I think this is a under-recognized metric, and an under-tapped resource. I mean, yeah. Which makes it, I was talking to Brooke about this, it makes it so much fun to be an artist in this town, in this particular town. And when you go to barroom, you'll see all these artists that are constantly coming in and out of this town. And you start to look at the pattern, you realize that that's not by mistake, right? You realize that there's something going on here that's maybe not going on in a lot of other places. And it is a very, everyone that I've worked with on this project, we've shook hands and looked each other in the eyes, and you could feel the connection. That goes beyond a transaction. It's not like they're doing the thing because they're doing, I don't know the words for it exactly, but something very magical is going on here that is so important, and important for all of us in this room to not overlook, because it's like this thing is a result of all these different hands, tossing this idea around and doing it in earnest and doing it in just, and like that doesn't really happen in a lot of places.
I think so I was thinking about what you said earlier, and I mean earlier, like when we were talking at the bar, that you mentioned just now about the small town, the dilemma of the small town psychosis, where, you know, to grow up here and be from here, and this is a place that people leave frequently. It's a very transient city, but those of us who stay, who are born, raised, stay. Place is like the first decision that gets made for you, right? It's something that happens to you. You don't really get to, it's maybe a second decision. You don't choose your parents, you don't choose your place. And then I think if you like make the decision at some point to choose the place back, then you have to ask questions of what kind of place you would like to have. And I do think, I mean, you know, Columbus, for me, is the kind of place where people are kind of always turning over that question of what kind of place do I want to have, and watching it evolve and evolve and evolve. And I think that just leads to collaborative ideas, because I don't want the kind of place that only I want to have. You know what I mean? The kind of place that only I want to have is probably not fun for like half my neighbors. And so I'm interested in the kind of place they would like to have too. You know what I mean? So I think what you've encountered here is that a spirit of collaboration that asks, like, what kind of place can we build while everyone else is exiting?
Total. That's 100% of the feeling of working here and working on this particular project was the we build, the we are building. We're building it together. And it's a really radical way. It's so radical to the point that it may, like, people may just miss that here. Like, it's just like, it's so radical that you, again, try to make anything in any other city and see what happens. Like, it's not the same.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Just because it is a really special part of, you know, barroom. I mean, I wonder if we could talk a little bit about, you know, I don't want to give anything away, really. There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot we could give away. I'm not gonna ask about the phone number.
Exactly.
But I will ask about the posters. Do you want to talk a little bit about like when you come into the bar, you are surrounded by Columbus history, and you're surrounded by proper names, names of performers. But these are also artworks that Tavares has kind of taken into the studio and turned back out with a difference, let's say. So do you want to talk at all about that?
A little bit. I feel like you guys should. I feel like for me, is like I'm good at receiving a gift and giving it, like rewrapping it and giving it back. I think that's what the posters are. But I'm curious to see what y'all think about it, because these are posters that are like an archive of the life here.
Well, and I'll just quickly say, so like I don't think it was our first. It was cold, so it was the second visit. It was very cold. Yeah, we went over to Rich Street Records. Sammy,
big up.
Truly big up Rich Street Records.
Seriously. And because there's a coffee element to Barroom as well, so we were already talking to Upper Cup and to Sammy
Shout
and Michael.
out Upper Cup, for sure.
And Sammy, we rolled up to Rich Street Records, though, on a day where it was not open generally. And so for the bunch of us who were there, we were sort of standing at a door that had no sign, really, and wondering, like, is there actually a record store here? Like, is this real? And I will say, like, a lot of making this project, there have been many moments of, is this real? Like, is this actually, is this real? Touch, the solid thing next to you. And of course, it's an incredible space. Rich Street has evolved out of Roots Records, which evolved in certain ways out of Skankland, which is sort of an origin point of reggae in Columbus. And we were meeting and greeting and kind of just being in this record store, and we see these posters that are all over. I mean, lots of bins of posters from concerts, sort of from the 2000s through the early 20-teens. And they were, being offered for sale for $5 each, which seemed like a low number for like these sort of historical documents, actually. But I respect that. I mean, that's
just giving stuff away.
Yeah, basically. That's cool though. And it took us a long time actually to circle back and to buy up a lot of posters, and then we shipped them to you. They came back in a different state again, I will say. But I mean, in the process, like, we came to feel that, like, Barroom is, as much as it links to your history, it, like, really, really, I mean, if it does anything, it's to try to value, like, a history that's local to Columbus, and a music history, a history of community, a history of, like, utterly grassroots initiative, doing things without anything, like, I mean, Rich Street now, Sammy, is there actually a furnace in there, or is it just the wood-burning stove? Wood-burning stove. So that gives you a sense of the place. I just think there's a magic to this history, but also, like, it's a magic that's alive. Like, it's not over. And, hopefully Barroom is a way of valorizing that for all of us, yeah.
I would say it was cool to walk in the room, and initially, you remember, he's like, look at these posters, and I was like, I don't think I ever went to any of those shows. And then to look around and be like, wait a minute, I was at that one, and that one, and that one. It was so cool to kind of have my history reflected back to me in that way.
Yeah, there you go.
Awesome.
I mean, for me, like, art has been historically leveraged for so much horribleness in the world, and the kind of, and what I mean by that is the infrastructure. I mean, art was originally with a capital A, aristocracy, bourgeois. Like, it wasn't for common folk. It was like, we didn't speak Latin. That's what it was like. And I think that, and we talked about this earlier, like how do we leverage the some of the panache and some of the extravagance of being an artist for the people. I mean, this is for us, right? And being able to take these posters that are like posters that are in a rack for $5 that were like, masterworks.
They're hand painted too.
They're masterworks. They're truly masterworks. And kind of work with these posters in a way was a way of like, having a museum bring a bar at the museum, right? Leveraging the system that is usually not for everyone and using it for everyone. And working with an institution that is somehow on board with that in the most amazing way is phenomenal. But I also think that like there is a leveraging. As an artist, it's important for us to leverage these platforms for the people, because otherwise, what else are we doing, right?
And it does, yeah. And it creates this kind of idea too, where other people feel like they can do that where they are. I think also, I don't know if you have this experience. We don't have to really do like a jokey MacArthur talk, but I was like, my first impulse is like, I get to weaponize this now because to the rest of the world, this translates as something that actually doesn't translate to me, but I can take advantage of their translations, you know what I mean? And I can do things that actually bring the people I care deeply about into the room, into rooms they might not otherwise get into. And there's that. It is unfortunate to kind of have to leverage material success in that manner, but I do think that if you are going to have access to the pretty, shiny things that people are seemingly very into, you got to turn it into a weapon for the people. You really have to turn it into a weapon for the people, because otherwise you are just sitting atop your mountain of shine and no one else can access you or it or the benefits that it could provide you. And therefore, like, no, you're also not building a lineage. Like when I told a story about Amina, Amina was building a lineage of artists, these 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And she wasn't saying, like, go out in the world and create large scale things that win you things. She was just saying, go out in the world and look at the place you love differently. And that's the work of the artist at its core. And so I think, I hope at least that people look at something like Barroom and ask themselves what they can bring to life that might prolong that childlike excitement of fearlessness.
Yeah. So the MacArthur for me is like the one white guy in Compton. in the gang, like he's with the dudes, and you're like, what did that dude do?
Yeah.
To be able to, right?
Did you have to do that when I did the Zoom call with everyone else? I was like, why the fuck am I here?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I was wearing like everyone was all dressed nice. I had on like to my photo, there's this punk band called Sham 69, and they have these old shirts, and one of them, I got a vintage shirt that says "Don't Die of Ignorance," and I was wearing it, and during my photo shoot, and the photographer was like, all right, now we're gonna take like a set of photos with the suit you bought. You bought a suit in the car, right? And I was like, Mike, no, brother, this is it. This is how I dress. You know what I mean? And so I was on that call like, what the fuck? It is like the white guy in the Compton gang.
Yeah, everyone's just like, he's dangerous, right? If he's in that gang with those dudes, he did a lot, right? And it's funny though, because I feel like to a certain extent people have a hard time talking to you, like straight up. Because they're like, you did the thing, and now you're the dude who was in the gang, and you're dangerous. You're dangerous. And I find that fascinating. Like, it is like opportunity, but it's also a barrier.
Yeah, and I think for me, as someone, I really love, a big part of the reason I still live in the place I was born and raised and hope to stay is because I just love the up-close social interaction. Like, there are people here who taught me when I was in elementary school. There are friends here I've had since I was like 14 years old, 13 years old. And so, like, a prime example, this is the day they announced the MacArthur or whatever. I was having dinner with a friend I've had for like 2-3 decades, and I was late. And, because it's a hectic day, so I pulled up late, and she was like, yo, like, I'm really proud of you, and I love you, but also, yeah, you know what I mean? And so there is this kind of I think for me, living here and staying here and being grounded here really helps break down that wall in a way that is puzzling to me, because when I go to New York, LA, or wherever else, I do encounter that, where people are like, but here, it just doesn't matter. Like, no one here, they know that I am here, and they see kind of the full person. They see the full human. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. People are like, I often get the question of, not so much anymore, but earlier in my career, I would get the question of, why don't you move? And people would ask that as though it's like a failure of my imagination and not their own, right? And not like, first off, my house is here. You know, it's like not, my coffee shop's here. But also, because you mentioned it, coming here and collaborating with folks and people looking you in the eye and really being eager to get to know you as an artist and a person. I've never felt like at any point in my life in this place, people have been perhaps proud of me, but not afraid of me. Yeah. People have been proud of me, but not impressed by me. And I think that's important too, because it opens you up to real community building and community care. And that informs the art.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking earlier in Barroom about how, working on this project was like a masterclass of community building. Like, in a way, it's like, and it was organic too. It was just like people just knew where to be it's like being on a team where everyone knew to play and where to be at the right time. And it really is, as a fellow micro towner, someone who's from a small place, I really see that in a way that like someone who's not from a small place might not see it. And I realized that small places are so big. They're so big, and you see the artists that are coming out of small places, and you're like, whoa, it's big. Like I'm being from the Bahamas, like the first black man to win an Oscar is from the Bahamas, right? Like Sidney Poitier is from the Bahamas, and he was from an island even smaller than mine, which is crazy to imagine, right? So just like the idea that this radical creativity, this openness, because I really think that's what it's about. Like this openness is. And also this idea that like we're gonna build the thing together, like building the thing together is so radical, and it makes sense that that now that it's happened, it makes sense that Barham's here. Obviously it should be here. Like,
there's another dimension of, I approach some of what you're talking about like as an art historian, and just thinking about how utterly condescending the history of art has been to small places. And especially the history of post-war art, contemporary art, because like, the big cities, like especially New York, like they just totally dominate that history to the point where like, talk about unlearning. It's really, there's so much unlearning that goes into realizing that like that story is not only like the story, like the central story to which everything else is kind of a subsidiary story, but like that story is totally a smokescreen. Like there is the more you try to pull at it, like the less thread there actually is. And at the same time, the things that make art feel alive to people, like I say this as someone who grew up in St. Louis in a different part of this strange region that we call the Midwest. Like the things that felt alive to me as a young person about art are things that really only could have felt alive in a setting like St. Louis, where you were not, let's say, dominated by the presence of this enormous officialdom that comes with the art world and the market and just the multiplex of the museum system that's in New York, which is a great place. Not to knock New York. It's quite a city. But a big wind blows through a small place, and I just think that's something that like is not only like I don't want to do the thing of being here where it's like we're patting ourselves on the back for for something that's easy, but I actually think it's like it's something that we really should reckon with, that it's like this is the kind of place where you can be an artist in an extremely full way that's actually like quite difficult / I don't know how easy it would be to do for any, especially very young person. not here, or it would be a completely different kind of experience. And I feel like maybe we should just become more, on the art side of things especially, like more effective partisans of these kinds of places, like, and this place in particular.
Yeah. Yes. I didn't want to blow my one chance to ask you a question. Hopefully we'll have more.
Because I have a question for you.
So I feel like most of us never get a chance to ask their heroes a question, right? Because we don't know what's happening when it's happening, which is good. And I feel like I'm sitting next to one of the great thinkers, writers in the history of the world next to me.
It's great.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
And you have to think, right? You have to think, like, if you admire James Baldwin, for example, and James Baldwin was sitting on stage next to you, you'd be like, you don't choke, right? Don't choke. So I was thinking about this all day. I was like if I have Hanif on the stage next to me, like, I gotta ask the simple question, like. So my question's so simple. It's so simple. Like, I work with physical material, whether it's marble or bars or glass or ice. I've spent most of my life thinking about the impact that material has on the human experience. Talk to me about words, man. Like, tell me about what words, how words function in your world.
Thank you for your kind words. My therapist is really hammering me to take compliments better, and I'm failing at that. But to have an artist you admire, thank you. My favorite writer in history and the greatest Ohioan to ever live is Toni Morrison, I think, and who's. We're celebrating 100 years of her here next year, and I'm very honored to be a part of that. And what I love about Toni Morrison's work is this idea that my world is not that detached from your world, and language is actually the bridge that gets us there. And so my favorite Toni Morrison book of all time, and my favorite book of all time, by extension, is Jazz. And there's this very specific part of jazz where nothing's really happening except for a character is describing a city that could be any city. She's just standing in the middle of the street and saying, here are the buildings, here's the history of those buildings, here are the people shuffling to work. They could be going anywhere, and I love them all. And you're like, damn, this is my city now. Like, I actually have access to this city. When I was writing my first book of poems, which is a book called The Crown Ain't Worth Much, which was heavily inspired by Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City, and growing up in this kind of golden era of black film, the Boys in the Hood and Juice, and I was seeing all these coastal stories of black youth. And I remember thinking, well, this is not that far from what my touchable black neighborhood is. And in that book, there's this series of poems in the voice of my barber. And when the book came out, I was answering all these interview questions about, like, how did you get the tone right? How did you? It's like, no, that's how that man talks. That's actually transcription, right? I was literally transcribing him. And it's because people could not imagine that specifically for black folks who are steeped in the oral tradition, our elders are poets, our barbers are poets, our corner store people are poets, the drug dealers are poets. These people speak with extremely, right? And so we're talking about this world, this universe of language that is so flexible and can make the people you love into mythological figures who never die. My father is the greatest storyteller that exists, and he maybe has 5 total stories, and I've heard them 100 times each, right? But I've heard them all 100 times each, but when he gears up to say that 101st time, I'll be on the edge of my seat because he's such a good and brilliant user of language. Lastly, I'll say that my mother, before she passed, wrote. My mom worked 2 jobs. She worked for the state, and then she worked at the JCPenney call center back up there on the east side. And when you used to have to call JCPenney out the catalog, you maybe talk to my mom's. And she had a typewriter. She had this old typewriter. And she would old loud-ass typewriter, and she would sit up there and bang on the typewriter, and her bedroom was right above mine, so I'd open my window and listen to her work. And sometimes I would, like, especially if I was grounded, I would, like, sneak up the stairs, you know, very quietly to watch her work. She'd have her back to me and she'd be typing. And I loved to see this experience of an artist I loved at work, even though I didn't know what it meant at the time at 11, 12, 13 years old. And I loved looking over her shoulder in a way while she worked, because it felt to me like I was helping in the process of making her less alone while she labored over something she cared about. And I tend to think about language as a process for me of lineage making. And I hope then to think about it like this. I don't think writing is lonely work. I don't know if you feel that about art making. I don't think writing is, because you're not writing, I don't feel like I'm writing alone. I feel like if I'm lucky, when I'm in my office, back to the door, writing my whatever, my mother is returning the favor now by looking over my shoulder. And every ancestor who's built a universe around me is looking over my shoulder. And Toni Morrison is, maybe if I'm lucky, looking over my shoulder and saying that needs some work. And all these people are doing this work that we have through language. I love Gloria Naylor's The Women of Brewster Place. I love that book, and I love it because at the end, spoiler alert, but the book is older than almost everyone in this room, so the embargo's up. This book is, I'll try to make this quick because I do have a question for you. The book is about a neighbor. Has anyone read The Women of Brewster Place? It's beautiful, would recommend it. It's about this neighborhood of black people who are encased by this brick wall. They can't go outside the brick wall, so they don't know the world outside of that brick wall, right? And because of this, they begin to inflict harm on each other, because you encase anyone, anywhere, etc. At the very end of the book, there's this large inciting event of harm, and someone's had enough, and they pick up a crowbar and they start hitting at the wall. And then someone notices that, and they pick up something out of the trash, start hitting at the wall. And then before you know it, everyone in this neighborhood is hitting at the wall, hitting at the wall, hitting at the wall until a brick comes out. And then another brick maybe comes out, and then another brick starts to come out. And I tend to think that I know very well that the world that I want is not going to exist in my lifetime. But I also think that through the making of language and through the imagining of that world and through the presentation of that world through storytelling, through narrative, through other world, through like, to think about Octavia Butler, through other world building, through future building, I'm just trying to hit the wall enough till a brick comes out so that the person who comes after me can take the other brick out. And if I keep presenting language that creates that kind of rigorous thought around lineage, someone will come after me and the brick will come out. That was a long answer. I have a question about material. I'm glad you brought up material, because like you sculpt things and I just, in terms of physical touch, like physically working with objects, is there a material that you find has a larger reward at the end? Because some of the material you work with is like pretty malleable and some is like pretty immovable. And I'm interested in not the difference between that, but if you have a material that you feel that you are at odds with, that is difficult for you, but you feel the most reward at the end of the project.
Wow. So I consider myself to be materially agnostic, to be honest with you, while having a deep affinity for material. I think there's this myth that we live in this like material age, like we're materialists, but we're not really, right? Because we don't really love material. Right. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like society, like if you were like, we're living in the materialist culture, like people don't really behave as if materials are important. And I think they're very important. And I think the way that you wield your relationship with words is the way that I try to wield my relationship with material. Because I think materials, they tell, especially this process of archiving, like historic storytelling is so much about the material. Because within the material is the hand, and the hand is the person, and the person is love, and the person is joy, and the person is pain, and the person is was a baker or a butcher or a chef or and when you look at, for example, a Benin bronze, you see the material, but you see the person, the people. You see that community. And I think for me, material, I was trained as a printmaker at first, and a painter, and then I was trained as a glassmaker, and I discovered ceramics, and then started working with bronze. And then I started, I fell in love with ideas. And I think the first person who picked up the crowbar to hit on the wall, they had an idea. They were like, I have this idea. If I'm frustrated, I might want to just hit on this thing. And as simple as that is, that little simple idea is like, let's bring a barroom here, right? It's like a simple idea. It's like a really simple idea. But I think within that barroom is the story, and it's the lineage, and it's the celebration of the ancestor, and it's Yellow Man, and it's King Tubby, and it's Beres Hammond, right? It's Buju Banton, is all these artists in the room, and there's Marcus Garvey in the room, and Haile Selassie, and the history of the great black kings, and there's all that in this room, and this simple gesture, the simple hitting of the wall. And so I think that's by the way, that's a really beautiful way to frame that. But I think I'm agnostic, but I have a deep love for how specific materials can pull very particular kinds of emotional connections that are connected to the human experience. I think that's my love of what materials do, and using this kind of encyclopedia of materials as a way to tell the story of the kinds of stories in these ways that represent the stature of the people that I'm sometimes mentioning in the story, right? Like I mentioned earlier, like the story was, the ice was big because the story was big, right? And oftentimes, like you see the little plaque, like someone did something amazing in your neighborhood, and you see a little plaque in the corner, and you're like, that's not what they did. They didn't do this little plaque in the corner. Like they did a thing that was like almost immeasurable. And so how do you use materials to tell stories that are immeasurable? How do you get that across to an audience that like, this artwork will probably never do it, but I'm gonna definitely try to tell this big ass story. And hopefully the work starts to begin to communicate in some small way the impact that the stories had on me.
I think it's time to hit the bar.